This is a map from the 1890s, a time when the US state now known as Oklahoma was split into two, Oklahoma Territory and Indian Territory. The events surrounding this tale took place in June of 1899 in the Indian Territory city of Tahlequah in Cherokee Country. As always, I have quoted the source material, but a word of warning, some of the historical quotations included in this video express racial prejudice. I've included them to present an accurate account of the attitudes. They do not reflect my personal views. Our story begins with a young man named Joseph Ryan. He was a merchant in Tahlequah. Originating from Ireland, he was one of the few white traders in the city. While he was at a function one evening, he met a young woman named Hattie Redbird. She was described in the press as, quote, a quarter-breed Cherokee Indian girl with just enough Indian blood in her veins to make her treacherous. She has black hair and eyes, a pale complexion and a pretty form. The 18-year-old Hattie had attended the boarding school for Indians in Carlisle, Pennsylvania for several years and had recently returned to her family in Tahlequah. Neighbours who watched the relationship between Hattie and Joseph unfold said that they appeared inseparable and desperately in love. The local press, when later reporting the eventualities of this story, said that Ryan was so besotted with Hattie that he had become her slave. But Joseph may not have felt as deeply for Hattie as she or their onlookers thought, because after a while, Joseph met another Cherokee woman by the name of Bertie Sanders and distanced himself from the now heartbroken Hattie. Hattie Redbird came from a prominent family in the Cherokee Nation. It's said that they had a beautiful house on the outskirts of Tahlequah. When her entire family went for a week-long visit out of town, Hattie remained at home saying that she needed to rest. That day she sent a note to Joseph asking for him to meet her. She wrote, "It is the last time I will ever ask a favour of you, so please come early. I have so many important things to say to you." Joseph Ryan, although by now in a new relationship, could not resist the appeal of his old love. So on the evening of Monday the 5th of June 1899, he went to her home. Hattie Redbird later told a jail officer by the name of Duncan the following. Joseph came and we talked about everyday events for a while. Then I asked him why he had commenced going with Bertie Sanders. He gave me a short answer and said it was none of my business. That made me mad, and I was tempted to shoot him dead then and there. But I did not forget my first purpose, to torture him to death. So I smiled sweetly and passed it off. I told him that I had another fellow anyway, and we'd just let things pass. He seemed pleased and said that would be best. It was not long after this conversation that Hattie brought out a bottle of wine. She told her jailer that she had drugged the wine and was a little anxious that Joseph would suspect something and not drink it. She said he was always so quick to catch on. But not this time. Joseph downed the wine, no questions asked. After a few minutes, Joseph Ryan had fallen asleep and Hattie Redbird went to work. She tied his hands and legs together and placed him on a chair. She then secured his head to the back of the chair so he couldn't slump forward. She then pushed him into a narrow closet in the kitchen wall, untied him from the chair and shoved him in. It was a very small space with shelves lining the walls. According to reports, it was barely big enough for an average person to stand upright. Squeezed tightly into the closet and now struggling to breathe, Joseph began to come round. By now, Hattie had made her way upstairs to the bedroom. This is where we see the lengths our jilted lover had gone to exact her revenge. This illustration from the St. Paul Globe newspaper dated July the 23rd, 1899, is not entirely accurate, but Hattie had cut a hole in the floor right through to the ceiling of the kitchen closet. In the room above, she was armed with a glass pitcher, a rubber hose and a tub of water and ice. From a tall stepladder, she siphoned the cold water over the now conscious Joseph's head from about 7 feet up. Hattie claimed that the water poured constantly from 10 p.m. that Monday night until 12 p.m. the following day. She explains, "I carried up a tub of ice water and, bringing a high stepladder, commenced my work. I dropped water out of the pitcher for 14 hours nearly, and all the while he begged me to stop. Whenever he would move his head to one side, I would change the position of my hand so that I never missed a drop during the whole time. Suddenly he became quiet, after I dropped all the water that was in the tub, which was kept cold by a large piece of ice. I commenced on Monday night about 10 o'clock. At about noon the next day he was dead. I am glad to say that his last words were a prayer for my forgiveness. It was never specified in the press, but I can only assume that Hattie Redbird didn't hold the hose over Ryan for the entire 14-hour period, and instead just left it in place. With a great deal of pressure on his chest from the cripplingly tight space, as well as the constant flow of water, Joseph had struggled to breathe. Eventually he died from sheer exhaustion and asphyxiation. Hattie made her way downstairs, opened the door of the closet, and let him fall out onto the kitchen floor. She left him there and retired to bed. Joseph Ryan wasn't missed until Wednesday the 7th of June, when his new love interest, Bertie Sanders, raised the alarm. Police officers didn't have to look far. That evening they found Joseph where Hattie had left him. When they discovered her asleep upstairs, she admitted that she intended to leave him there until her family came home or someone else came looking for him. His clothes were still wet. It was believed that Hattie had used about 5 gallons of water. During his ordeal, Joseph Ryan had broken both his wrists, as well as several ribs, in attempts to escape. The final report to come out of Tahlequah, which was printed in newspapers all over the country and beyond, quoted the officers who arrested Hattie. It states, with some exaggeration no doubt, that Hattie, quote, has the most fiendish nature of anyone they ever arrested. Her brutality is greater than any of the outlaws who have roamed in her vicinity. Although the press clearly acknowledged that she had committed a terrible crime, language like her brutality is greater than any other outlaw, and headlines like new type of the new woman, would suggest that there was a level of admiration for the boldness of her actions. Was it her good looks, which the press also commented on, or simply the fact that a young female murderer was a novelty? Or maybe it was a bit of both. When the story reached British shores, one English newspaper wrote that she invented a new method of murder, before going on to call her an ingenious young woman. Writers at the Scottish newspaper, the Kirkintilloch Herald, dated August 16, 1899, took the opportunity to hail Hattie Redbird's inventive method of killing by comparing it to those of English outlaws. They wrote, "English criminals display little imagination or inventiveness in their crimes. Possibly the heavy atmosphere and the beer that they drink deaden their faculties. Whatever may be the cause, there is a sameness in the methods they pursue. There is little of the fiendish ingenuity in the torture of victims which is occasionally seen in the west of America, where a proportion of the population has Indian blood in its veins." Hattie Redbird was arrested, jailed, and eventually tried for murder. The only information I could find regarding her trial was that she gave a full confession in court, showing little to no remorse. I'm not sure of her exact fate, but this quote from the St. Paul's Globe newspaper dated the 23rd of July 1899 gives a fair prediction. Now that she is behind bars and will undoubtedly be shot to death for her crime, she shows not the slightest trace of regret for her action.